At this time, the Clean Energy Buyers Association calls Ivan Urlaub and Mr. Brent Alderfer to the stand.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll go ahead and get you sworn in. If you can place your left hands on the Bible and raise your right hands. And do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Alderfer, would you please state your full name and business address?
Yes, Brent Alderfer. My address is 6312 Meeting House Road. That's New Hope, Pennsylvania.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm a director of NEE, that's New Energy Economics, and one of the directors and founders of an organization that's designed to provide economic data and information on the clean energy transition.
Would you please briefly describe your experience?
Yes, I've got an electrical engineering degree from Northeastern University, a law degree from Georgetown, and after practicing commercial law, I served and was appointed and served as a commissioner on the Colorado Public Utility Commissioner. Following that term, I started a wind energy development company, developing wind energy east of the Mississippi and some of the first wind projects, and sold that in 2006. We sold that to Iberdrola as they entered the U.S., now Avangrid. And then we started a utility scale solar development company and developed projects nationally, including North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, designed to provide economic utility scale solar to utilities and corporate customers. We did some of the first utility scale solar projects nationally. And in 2021, sold that company to AES. And since then, I've been consulting on transition economics and economic paths forward to get to carbon-free generation.
Mr. Urlaub, would you please state your full name and business address?
Ivan Urlaub, and the business address of New Energy Economics is 1121 Military Cutoff Road, Suite C, number 205 in Wilmington, North Carolina.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm principal and founder of Urlaub Strategies, LLC, a strategy consulting firm, or working on with private and for-profit entities on energy policy and regulation focused on carbon, inclusivity, and business strategy and resource economics. In a consulting capacity, I'm director of energy and infrastructure for New Energy Economics. And New Energy Economics was asked by the Clean Energy Buyers Association to present testimony in this proceeding, and I'm testifying on SEBA's behalf.
Would you please briefly describe your experience?
I started my career in natural resource economics and global infrastructure development on USAID-funded projects, then transitioned to a contractor for the U.S. Office of Pipeline Safety for a consulting firm to them, reviewing U.S. domestic and military oil pipeline emergency response plans for worst-case scenario response planning. After completing master's degrees in public policy and environmental management at Duke University, I served 17 years as policy director and then executive director of the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. In those roles, I developed and collaborated on policy analysis and advancement relating to numerous electricity, gas, buildings and transportation policies, regulatory proceedings, utility programs, state government programs related to Duke Energy and Progress Energy. I listed a select amount of those in my testimony. We pioneered the nation's first comprehensive state-level clean energy market intelligence practice, measuring and reporting economic activities, impacts, and customer bill impacts of state clean energy policies, regulations, and utility programs. And that's been replicated now by U.S. Department of Energy and labor. Additionally, I participated in the North Carolina Utilities Commission's study advisory group that informed the design and economic analysis of the North Carolina Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard, which eventually became law, as we know. I also served as a two-term commissioner on the North Carolina Legislative Commission on Climate Change, appointed by President Pro Tem of the Senate both times, and as an advisor to 4 North Carolina administrations. And more recently, and I'm closing, was a Energy Security Fellow with Securing America's Future Energy out of DC, focused on energy, geopolitics, national defense, and global economic competitiveness.
Did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket on May 28th, 2024, direct testimony consisting of 53 pages and 1 exhibit?
Yes.
And your testimony includes confidential information, correct?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to your direct testimony and exhibits at this time?
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions today that appear in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
And did you also cause to be pre-filed in docket E100 sub 190A, a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Yes.
Presiding Commissioner, at this time, I would ask that the confidential direct testimony of Mr. Alderfer and Mr. Urlaub and a redacted version of the same be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, as well as the witness summary.
Okay. Seeing no objection, your motion is allowed. The direct testimony, including confidential portions, along with the summary of the testimony, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
I would also ask that the witnesses' exhibits be the witnesses' exhibit be pre-marked for identification to be entered into the record at an appropriate time.
Okay. Seeing no objection, the 1 exhibit that's attached to the direct testimony will be marked as identified.
And there is no cross-examination for these witnesses, but they are available to answer commissioner questions.
And before we begin with commission questions, since the stipulation has been entered into the record, I'm going to allow cross-examination from any parties that wish to provide cross-examination in regard specifically limited to the stipulation.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Drack?
Sure. Thank you, Presiding Commissioner Kimmerer. Turning to page 11 of your testimony, you set forth the purpose of your testimony on page 11, lines 13 through 14, and I'll read that briefly. Say the purpose of our testimony is to enumerate the significant risks and costs of ratepayers if Duke increases its reliance on natural gas for electric generation as it has proposed to do. You see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Does your testimony include any concrete proposals with respect to new customer programs or EEDSM initiatives?
No.
It only suggests that those could be an alternative to gas.
Thank you. Presiding Commissioner, we understand that the chair and presiding commissioner have elected to overrule our objection, and we are comfortable briefing these issues on brief. We will observe, however, the procedural oddity it is to have witnesses here supporting a stipulation that purports to address new customer and grid edge programs, and yet their pre-filed testimony does not at all propose any grid edge or energy efficiency programs.
I might say the subsequent witness is probably the right witness to address those questions to, not us.
So in that case, why would this be the panel that would be sponsoring the stipulation, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so Mr. Jirag, I can clarify. In the filing letter that was included with the stipulation, the witnesses who supported the relevant portions of the testimony were identified, and these were not the witnesses who had identified the portion that SEVA supported.
So would it be appropriate to withdraw the stipulation this time and wait until the appropriate witnesses that can actually sponsor the stipulation are presented?
I don't think it'd be an appropriate time to withdraw it, but our next witness could speak to a specific paragraph that's included in the stipulation that is listed in the filing letter is supporting.
Mr. Drack, you'll have an opportunity to cross-examine. And for clarification for the record, who is the witness that will be able to answer the questions that Mr. Drack has just asked? Anyone who can answer, yes.
The cover letter supporting the stipulation and filed together with the stipulation does identify the witnesses, and paragraphs 4 through 8 were supported by NCSEA and SACE et al. Witness Jake Duncan. Paragraphs 5 through 6 and 9 through 10 are being supported by SIGFR witness Brian Collins. And as to paragraph 11, SEVA witness Kyle Davis is the appropriate witness.
Okay, and all of those witnesses are present and will be testifying this afternoon or today, is that correct?
SIGFR witnesses will be present, and that's all I can speak for.
Again, Presiding Commissioner, we don't intend to keep emphasizing this. We understand the commission's ruling, but I will note that one of the witnesses just identified as a sponsor for this settlement has already been excused from the proceeding. That would be witness Duncan.
Presiding Commissioner Kemmeray, Duke was on notice of this being filed well in advance. They made the motion to object to this over several days ago, and they had every opportunity to reserve time to cross-examination witness Duncan, and the outcome that the commission overruled that. And yesterday, when there was an opportunity to object to the excusal of witness Duncan, no objection was made by Duke at that time.
Okay, I'm going to take Mr. Drack's objection to the portion of the stipulation that is being sponsored by witness Duncan under advisement, and I will provide some response at a later time. Are there any? Can you please come to the microphone and identify yourself, please, for the record?
I'm so sorry. Justin Somolowski on behalf of the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association.
Okay. Okay, with that, is there further cross-examination for this panel?
No further questions at this time.
Redirect?
No.
Okay, so we'll move to questions, commission questions.
All right. Good morning, gentlemen. Just a few questions for you. Page 38 of your testimony, I'm looking at lines 15 and 16 indicate that Duke has burned diesel and coal in its units at various times throughout the year due to insufficient gas supply. When did that occur, that Duke burned alternate diesel and coal due to insufficient gas supply?
We were quoting the documents provided by Duke in this proceeding.
Which documents?
Specifically, I'll just double check really
Okay,
quick.
okay. Mr. Urlaub, could it be that you're referring to the data request that's attached to your testimony? Data
It-
request response.
It would be, so generally we do have two quotations in here. For example, the quotation on the subsequent page, page 39. The companies, line 7, starting lines, about line 7. Companies, however, currently successfully manage this through the usage of alternative fuels, namely diesel and coal. My apologies. On the subsequent page, where they're talking about, we are quoting Duke, I think it's Appendix K, where Appendix K states, the companies, however, currently successfully manage this through the usage of alternative fuels, namely diesel and coal. To transition away from coal, however, the companies need to increase the fuel security of natural gas so that they will have the reliable supply and combined fleet needs during peak demand periods.
Okay, but you're not referring to specific instances or dates of which you're aware on which the company had to utilize diesel or coal because of insufficient gas supply.
No, we did
Okay.
not go that far.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was clear there. Thank you. All right, I've reviewed your testimony and understand the content of your testimony. One question I have for you, you all testify extensively about the risks associated with natural gas, commodity risks, and then you get into some other risks, infrastructure risks, et cetera. But do you disagree with the company's position as it's set forth in the filings made to us that natural gas fired capacity is absolutely critical in the near term?
We do. In fact, it's currently being used. Couple of points that are of principal concern to CBIS customers, both large major corporations and small businesses, is with the increased reliance on natural gas, some 19 times increase in the amount of energy to be generated with combustion turbines and natural gas. The significant risk that is passed on to ratepayers that is not accounted for, in our view, in the portfolio analysis is the price impacts of periodic price spikes.
And Mr. Alderfer, I understand
Okay.
that testimony. I follow you there.
Yeah.
But my question really pertains to the near term, this period of time. And by near term, I mean, in over the next 10 years, 10 to
5 to
15
10.
years. Yeah.
Exactly. So to shorten that point, if the actual cost of hedging 20 to 25-year natural gas prices, which is available, were included in the portfolio analysis, what you would select is a greater proportion of fuel-free resources, wind, solar, and others, so that you may end up, in fact, one of the witnesses for Duke acknowledges that if that price assumption on the ultimate cost to ratepayers of natural gas, including, as you understand, price spikes like the $3 billion one that occurred last year, if that were included, then you would have a greater emphasis on a greater selection, higher number of megawatts of fuel-free resources.
Okay. So is it your testimony today then that in the near term, sort of given the risks that you've outlined associated with natural gas in your testimony and from the stand today, that the gas capacity that Duke proposes should be replaced with wind and other fuel-free resources?
That would be our expectation if the true costs of 25-year gas supply were included in the portfolio analysis. So for instance, very quickly.
And can you be specific when you say wind? Do you mean offshore or onshore wind?
It's both, but offshore is probably the biggest contributor as I understand it.
Okay.
So very quickly on the costs that are passed through to ratepayers from these spikes, which are not included in our view in the analysis. Duke basically says they hedge for 5 years, partially hedge for 5 years, and said they could do it longer, but that's the appropriate in their testimony. That's their appropriate period of time. In fact, there are major players in the gas market, major investment banks that will provide to somebody like Duke, creditworthy customer rate back, a 25-year hedge price on natural gas, taking into account all of those global volatility things that we're now exposed to based on LNG exports. They'll take that into account and price it for Duke, not 5 years. And in fact, very quickly, the fact that 5-year partial hedge is not effective to protect ratepayers like my clients was demonstrated in 2022 when there's $3 billion of cost based on the invasion of Ukraine. So that hedge is not obviously sufficient, but there are hedges available. And
Mr. Alderfer, would any hedge have been sufficient to protect electric customers or ratepayers during that period of time to which you just referred?
Yes, exactly. And here's why. I think in a recent avoided cost case, this commission, very forward-looking in my view, as a former commissioner, said we want you to price the hedge for the full life of the what was the power purchase agreement in that case, I think. So whether the commission would require them to purchase that full hedge for 25 years or not, it's available from creditworthy investment banks that would price the 25-year cost of gas, and then that number could be put into the portfolio analysis. If you're not going to require a 25-year hedge, that simply means you're using the assets of my clients to provide that hedge. And that's what's unacceptable to SEBA customers is let's say the price of the hedge raises the price of natural gas, taking into account billions of dollars of episodic events over the next 25 years, which are virtually guaranteed given the LNG pipeline around the world, then that's the cost that's being backed by the assets of my clients. And so whether you require them to purchase the hedge or not, that's the price of natural gas that, in our view, must be in the portfolio analysis. And if I could just anecdotally, I know as a commissioner, it's tough to decide how fast can you interconnect, how fast can you reconductor 30 miles of transmission line. But if I could say, with respect, that is Duke's business. That is what it does, is to look at the urgency and build the facilities and try the interconnection expedition that will make things work, as opposed to, and again, no disrespect intended, as opposed to thinking that we can hope there won't be a tax on LNG tankers in the Gulf of Oman. It's just, it is our business here in North Carolina to run the proper price in the model and then expedite the generation of those resources. And we think there'd be significant more megawatts brought online if that price was fully incorporated.
And
Is that responsive? I hope.
Mr. Urlaub?
sorry, Chair Mitchell. And to clarify, we're not saying, we're not asking the commission to require Duke to purchase that hedge. What we're saying is that it's very valuable to use, to actually get quotes from those banks for that long-term hedge and use it for the purposes of planning. And that we do think, based on the other evidence we included, the other calculations are intended to be illustrative to show that, as public staff witness Thomas said, like the delta and the PVRRs of the various portfolios compared to portfolio 0 is a pretty tight band. And so the dollar amounts in our confidential testimony that are illustrative of real world experience over the last few years, and then comparative of, for example, Duke's P3 fall and P2 fall. The PVRRs we provide in confidential testimony are at or exceed the cost delta, the PVRR deltas between some of the portfolios that Duke has provided, which suggests that the real possibility of gas variability, such as between Duke's high price and its base price, if the high price, for example, happened, and Duke has built to this plan, to its preferred plan, P3 fall base, and uses that amount of gas that they would use at that price, it would exceed cost delta and the PVRRs between different portfolios. And so that's why we're suggesting that not only was this global connectivity that was made apparent by the Ukraine invasion for a prolonged period of time, not only was that not foreseen in the 2020 IRP, Duke's 2020 IRP natural gas price forecast, but it wasn't priced in any way. That volatility, that prolonged global volatility wasn't priced in. And we think it's reasonable to expect, given what we've described here, that is not a one-off event. We'll continue to have that over the useful life of these plants. And so we're essentially asking ourselves, and then bringing forward to this proceeding to you for consideration, how can we get it priced in? And this seems to be the simplest method, and probably the least costly, least painful way to better price in than the current approach of a high gas price sensitivity.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Urlaub. All right. I have nothing further.
So I have a follow-up
Actually,
question.
Yes, I'll ask the question. We have one additional question. So Mr. Urlaub, for you, indicated that it's worth pricing in the hedge when we're modeling the role that these assets would play in meeting the long-term resource needs of the company. Can you be more specific? Like, what are these hedges are when you testify to pricing in a hedge? I understood your testimony to be the hedge should be a 25-year hedge, or a hedge that covers the lifespan of the asset. Is that correct?
So witness Alderfer researched exactly how that could be accomplished. If you don't mind,
Okay.
if I can turn it to.
There are a number of major players, but we talked to two, Morgan Stanley and Bank of America. And the short version of what hedges are available to a creditworthy company such as Duke are, first, there are hedges up to 10 to 12 years that are liquid and can be purchased. Beyond that, just any party can't get a 25-year hedge. You need the credit to back it. And that's what very few parties, but Duke is one, could provide. What then that bank does in return is, and they confirmed to us that they would be more than happy, and of course, to have that kind of business, to provide that kind of hedge, not to me or anybody else, but to utilities, to say exactly what that would cost. And the way they do that, not surprisingly, is they look at a whole series of instruments, long-term contracts with suppliers, other hedges that are available, offsetting, counterbalancing customers and hedges that they have. And then they put their assets behind a 25-year price. So that's how you know it's a real price. And that's a price we would encourage that Duke be required to get.
What is that price?
We don't know until they get it. Because it's based on particular circumstances of the region, the basis differential from Henry Hub.
Can you give me a ballpark?
I can't. I know Duke probably can get closest to any of us in this room as to what that hedge price would be. But our point from SEBA, real quickly, is if you don't get the price or choose not to include it in the portfolio analysis, what you're doing is asking SEBA assets to back what Morgan Stanley and Bank of America would back. So you can, in fact, I think at one point,
Mr. Alderfer, I'm going to stop you. What do you mean by that? What do you mean SEBA assets? What assets are you talking about?
well, I'm talking about the fact that these fuel costs are passed through directly to customers with no impact on the utility. So the assets are the budgets that they need to pay on future fuel cost adjustments. So it's their, you don't have to call it assets, maybe I shouldn't call it assets, but their,
The cost of electricity?
because, yeah, it's their fuel cost adjustments over the next 25 years, which are significant and could be referred to as speculative. And in the past decade, they could safely be ignored because we were in a period of very low volatile domestic prices. That's over and won't come back as demonstrated by the $3 billion surcharge last year. So you got to put those periodic events in the future, price them, which hasn't been done. Duke, I think, said they're speculative. They're speculative, yeah, but they're billions of dollars. So I guess I wouldn't characterize it as our assets, but our budgets, our costs.
What can, Mr. Alderfer, Mr. Urlaub, just clarify for me, one last question. How are your clients different from the members of SIGFR or the members of CUCA? What's the difference?
I don't think they are. I think we were invited by Clean Energy Buyers Association to provide this testimony, but I think we're really talking about all ratepayers.
That's right. It's all right there.
But do your customers want specific types of generating assets to serve the system? I guess I'm trying to understand, or are you all representing the same interest here?
I think the interests of SEBA customers, although they're major users, are the exact same as residential customers. Yes.
Okay, well, I wasn't asking you about residential customers, the other industrial customers.
Same as the other industrials. They all bear these costs and they're unaccounted for in the current.
And the fact that your customers are known as clean energy buyers doesn't mean that they have a specific preference for a specific type of generating asset.
I see.
It's not, I don't think it's our place to speak to that because we don't work for Clean Energy Buyers Association.
No, I see the distinction you're making. The point we're making here is that independent of the additional carbon benefits or clean energy benefits, on a purely economic basis, the natural hedge that's provided by fuel-free resources like solar and wind economically was underweighted. Economics alone, that I get your point. Yes, we do have an interest in addition in seeing what those assets are. But for instance, a hedge from Morgan Stanley wouldn't provide any additional clean energy benefit. And that's the value number that we're talking about. But I see your point. Yes, we, in addition to the economic interest, have an interest in clean energy. And it just so happens that fuel-free resources like solar and wind inherently provide a 25-year hedge, which is a very valuable thing. Yeah, I see your point.
There's also the portfolio effect. The working assumption here is that if we more accurately price in the future volatility of gas into planning, that the outputs of capacity expansion modeling, production cost modeling are going to yield different results. Either it's going to be in the amount of anticipated gas fuel burn, or it may even be the actual build or addition of megawatts of gas capacity, or both. Thinking about that, then it raises the obvious question, which we didn't do for, because it wasn't necessary for these points. We didn't think, well, if not, then gas fuel or gas plant capacity, then what? And that's where we bring forward the point that public staff witness Thomas made, that the cost delta, the PBRR deltas between the various portfolios was in a very tight band, and that those differences between several of those portfolios that have different gas amounts
I guess
were
that was,
smaller than the prices we've brought forward here. And that's just using these numbers. This isn't even using because this volatility is not priced in.
understood, Mr. Urlaub, and thank you for that. My question is, if not gas, then what? And and you've said your testimony doesn't address that, but I think I read your testimony to say other resources like renewables, energy efficiency, demand side management, wind
Mhm.
would I guess be more competitive than gas. Is that,
Well,
do I understand your testimony wrong?
No, you don't.
Okay.
And I think there's a number of reasons we're saying that. One is that the evidence before us shows the price or costs of other resources. And we already see the economic selection of solar, wind, other resources. So presumably that would continue in that direction. And we expect prices to continue.
I'd only add one sentence to that. And without running the models, of course, you don't know what exactly price is in or not. But we know from other experience around the country and globally for that matter, that properly priced, in our view, yes, you'll probably build the higher percentages of wind and solar that as expeditiously as possible. But what might and intuitively probably happens is that you end up with more CTs, so that you're backing up reliably with gas, but using less throughput of gas for energy production. So intuitively, you might end up with more CTs and less CCs. But yes, we did not run the model, but just to round out the picture of what might be a less volatile, more cost effective, and it so happens meets carbon goals faster.
Okay. Okay. All right. I have nothing further. What can you tell us about the price of a 10 to 15-year hedge, where there's a liquid market for those hedges?
I don't know it. I don't know it. I'm reporting what Morgan Stanley and Bank of America reported.
Does Morgan Stanley sell 25-year hedges to any electric utilities in this country?
No, I don't know that they do or don't, but they do have long hedges and are available to do it.
Okay.
Frankly, I think most utilities are just now, a long time ago, we faced take or pay contracts when we switched early from coal to gas. But it's on, and then we had this very stable decade of low gas prices. And I think only now, and you're probably in the lead, are utilities facing this exact question. So the question of who hedges and what's the real value of it and who does more renewables will probably play itself out.
And it's maybe more pronounced here than we might have seen in a place like Georgia Power's recent surprise IRP, where their selection of capacity additions went more in the direction of CTs than CCs. And I think that speaks to witness Alderfer's point that the CT is less likely to be used and is likely to be used to complement other resources. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'll stop.
Okay. Nothing further from me. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the end of commission questions. So I'll take questions on commission questions. Ms. Kress?
Thank you. Gentlemen, good morning. You were asked a question by Chair Mitchell about what the difference is between SEBA's interests in this action and, say, KUKA or SIGFR's interest. Do you recall that question?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. Are SEBA's members limited to customers of Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolinas?
As far as I know, no.
And that's because SEBA is a national organization, correct?
Correct.
And is it fair to say that SEBA's members have all stated carbon emissions reduction goals that they have publicly committed to in regulatory filings or otherwise?
I think the next witness can actually answer that, a SEBA employee. I think there's an interest. There's institutions, governments, banks, not all of which probably have carbon goals, but everyone has an interest in the economics of where carbon-free energy is going to take us over the next 20 years.
But certainly it's not your testimony that industrial customers as a whole are a monolith, that all view clean energy in the same way.
My only testimony is that all customers will face the risk we're pointing out. But to answer your question, no.
Thank you. And you were asked a question by Chair Mitchell related to what SEBA assets you were referring to. And you mentioned that perhaps assets wasn't the best word. Do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Are you aware that the cost of PPAs for renewable energy resources provided by third-party independent power producers in North Carolina are allowed to be recovered from Duke Energy's North Carolina retail ratepayers through the fuel rider?
Many utilities do that. I'm not aware of whether North Carolina does that or not.
I'm aware of that.
And so you're aware that those costs are disproportionately recovered from industrial customers on a volumetric energy basis?
As other costs in the fuel cost rider presumably are.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so, all right, I'll just,
I was going to say, I don't think a further response is
No,
necessary to
it's
the
not.
question. Any additional questions on commission questions?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Girat.
Thank you. So to be clear here, it's the case, if you could confirm, you have not run a full capacity expansion plan modeling that proposes a full resource plan that maintains or improves the reliability of the electric system in North Carolina without the new natural gas proposed by the companies and supported by the stipulation.
Can
correct?
Mr. Giroux clarify what commission question this is in response to?
Yeah. Chair Mitchell specifically asked, if not natural gas, then what? That was the question that was asked. And
yeah, that is going to that significant expense and also in the looking at the time from when the supplemental was filed. But it didn't seem necessary because that was not the question we were trying to answer. What we were trying to show was the risks, and the quantification we provided, what we enumerated was the risk and some examples of calculations of how large that risk might be. It was also public staff witness Thomas's note that we have to view rate increases within the context they are happening. And one of the contexts is that we're talking about 35 to 40% of generation coming from natural gas.
So I understand your testimony to be that's not maintaining reliability of the system was not a question you were asked to answer. But is it not the case that in this proceeding, the question the commission is seeking to answer is what is a full resource plan that maintains or improves the reliability of the system? Correct? That's the question in this proceeding.
Well, I mean, if we're going to think about it, I think it's a reliable, carbon compliant, least cost. I think it's a three-legged stool. I mean, just speaking generally, it's not just reliability, but reliability is a must, of course. And we're not even, what we're talking about is the inputs into modeling, which of course, no portfolio should be selected if it's not reliable. But what we're saying is that the inputs, if they had been different to capture the risks that we enumerated, the outputs would likely be different as well. And how the outputs would be different would likely affect the full suite of resources.
Your testimony is the output would likely be different, but just to confirm, no party, including SEBA, has produced in this proceeding a full modeled Encompass resource plan that maintains the reliability of the system without the new natural gas that is supported by the stipulation.
I can't speak to other parties.
Has
but
any
it-
CBO witness offered that?
No.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
No further questions.
Okay. I see no additional questions on commission questions. So with that, Mr. Snyder, I'll take motions.
I move that the pre-marked exhibit associated with this testimony be accepted into the record at this time.
Seeing no objection, your motion is allowed. And before I excuse the witnesses, I will rule upon Duke's objection to paragraphs 4 and 8 of the stipulation that have been sponsored by SACE witness Duncan. In reviewing the date that the stipulation was filed, the stipulation was filed prior to the date that witness Duncan was excused. Also, Duke has the opportunity to address paragraphs 4 and 8 with its rebuttal witnesses. And so Duke's motion is overruled. With that, thank you for your testimony. You may step down and you may be excused. We will take our morning break for 10 minutes, come back at 10:50, and we'll be ready for the next panel.